The dense forest stretched endlessly, a labyrinth of towering trees draped in thick mist that clung to the undergrowth like a whispered secret. Emma's breath came in shallow bursts, the rhythm uneven as she pushed forward, her hand resting protectively just below her swollen belly. The cold seeped through the thin layers of her jacket, chilling her skin despite the steady movement. Each step was a battle against the creeping fatigue that threatened to pin her to the forest floor. But she had nowhere else to go. Not anymore. Behind her, the faint glow of the town's distant lights vanished beneath the veil of fog, swallowed by the embrace of the wilderness. The streets she once knew, bustling with indifferent faces and hurried footsteps, seemed like a lifetime away. She had slipped away in the early hours, the weight of her solitude pressing down on her as heavily as the secret she carried. Pregnant and alone, with nothing but a small bag slung over one shoulder, Emma had wandered until the trees became her only companions. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss a new video. And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I love seeing all different people come together for these stories. It was the silence of the forest that unsettled her most. No hum of traffic, no distant chatter, only the soft rustle of leaves stirred by an unseen breeze. The air was thick, damp with the scent of earth and decay. And somewhere in the distance, a bird called out, its melancholic song cutting through the stillness. Emma's fingers trembled as she brushed a strand of hair from her face, her eyes scanning the shadowed path ahead. She was searching for what? She wasn't sure. Shelter, peace, or perhaps a sign that she wasn't entirely lost. As the ground beneath her boots shifted from gravel to soft moss, Emma noticed a narrow trail veering off the main path, almost hidden beneath a tangle of brambles and creeping vines. The path appeared less traveled, overgrown with weeds that clawed at the edges, as if nature itself sought to erase its presence. Curiosity stirred within her, mingling with a reluctant hope. With cautious steps, she veered toward the concealed route, the branches whispering overhead as if urging her onward. The deeper she moved into the woods, the more the mist thickened, curling around the gnarled trunks like ghostly fingers. The forest seemed to close in, the canopy above blotting out the waning light of the afternoon, casting everything into a dim twilight. Yet, amid the shadows, Emma's pace quickened despite the ache in her legs. Something pulled at her, an unseen force guiding her through the maze of trees and tangled roots. After what felt like hours, the undergrowth suddenly gave way to a clearing, and Emma's breath caught in her throat. There, half swallowed by ivy and moss, stood the ruins of a church. Its stone walls, cracked and weathered by time, rose defiantly against the encroaching wilderness. The spire, once proud and reaching toward the heavens, had crumbled, leaving jagged remnants silhouetted against the gray sky. Broken stained glass lay scattered on the ground like shattered jewels, catching what little light remained and casting fragmented rainbows on the forest floor. Emma stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest as she took in the forgotten sanctuary. The wooden door hung askew on rusted hinges, creaking softly as a breeze slipped through the broken windows. Ivy climbed the walls in thick, twisting vines, clutching the stone like a desperate embrace. The air was heavy with the scent of damp wood and earth, a quiet testament to years of neglect. It was a place lost to time, forgotten by the world, yet somehow alive with the echoes of the past. A shiver ran down Emma's spine, part fear and part fascination. She hesitated at the threshold, the weight of her circumstances pressing down on her like the cold stone beneath her feet. But within the ruins, she felt a strange sense of refuge. a haven carved out of the wilderness, where she might find a moment's respite from the storm raging inside her life. With slow, deliberate steps, Emma crossed the threshold into the church's shadowed interior. Dust danced in the shafts of fading light that filtered through the broken windows, settling on rows of shattered pews and fallen plaster. The floor was littered with debris. Fallen leaves, broken branches, and crumbled pieces of the altar. The silence was profound, broken only by the faint drip of water echoing somewhere deeper within the ruins. She moved further inside, her fingers trailing along the rough stone walls, tracing the faded outlines of murals long since worn away by rain and neglect. The colors had once been vibrant, scenes of angels and saints, stories told in paint and faith. Now, only ghostly shapes remained, their faces blurred and indistinct, watching silently as Emma explored the forgotten sanctuary. At the front of the church, the altar stood cracked but intact, its surface carved with symbols that time had not yet erased. Emma knelt beside it, her fingers brushing over a strange emblem etched deep into the stone, a circle intertwined with delicate lines and unfamiliar shapes. The symbol pulsed faintly in her mind, stirring something ancient and unspoken. A mix of unease and curiosity welled within her, a whisper that perhaps this place held secrets beyond its crumbling walls. Her gaze drifted upward to the faded ceiling, where beams of light pierced the gloom, illuminating dust motes that swirled like tiny stars caught in a forgotten constellation. The air here was thick with history, with stories untold and prayers long silenced. Emma felt the weight of loneliness shift, replaced by something fragile, a flicker of hope that perhaps, within these ruins, she could find what she so desperately needed. But the forest was unforgiving, and she knew she could not stay forever. The chill in the air seeped into her bones, and the ache in her body reminded her of the life growing inside her. Yet, for the first time since her world had unraveled, Emma allowed herself to breathe deeply, to feel the pulse of the forgotten church beneath her fingertips. Outside, the mist thickened once more, wrapping the ruins in a shroud of quiet mystery. Emma rose slowly, her hand resting on the altar as if seeking strength from the cold stone. The path back through the forest was uncertain, but within the sanctuary's broken walls, she had found a fragile refuge, a place where the past lingered, waiting to be uncovered. As she stepped back toward the doorway, the distant call of a bird echoed through the trees, a mournful yet hopeful sound carried on the wind. Emma paused, letting the moment settle around her like a fragile promise. The forgotten church had found her, and in turn, she had discovered a sanctuary hidden deep within the forest's heart. The forest faded into the background as Emma closed her eyes, letting the memories wash over her like a cold wave crashing against the shore. Just months ago, before the weight of her secret had settled so heavily upon her, her life had been anything but this, anything but isolated and uncertain. She could still remember the shock that had twisted her world on its axis, the moment when the doctor's words echoed in the sterile clinic room. She was pregnant. It had been a surprise, a mixture of fear and fragile hope. The man she had trusted, David, had smiled then, promising he would be there for her. But promises, like shadows, often fade when the light dims. Within days, David was gone, vanished without a trace, leaving only silence and unanswered questions behind. His phone went straight to voicemail. His apartment was empty except for the echo of their last argument. Emma had called, pleaded, but the man she knew was already a stranger. The weeks that followed unraveled everything she had believed about love and support. The warmth of friends turned cold, and family gatherings became battlegrounds of judgment and whispered doubts. Emma felt the weight of every glance, every hushed word, as though her pregnancy marked her as weak or reckless. The isolation grew, an invisible barrier tightening around her, cutting off the life she had once known. After a particularly bitter confrontation with her mother, who had insisted Emma should consider other options, she packed a small bag, her hands trembling not just from fear, but from the fierce determination rising within her. She needed to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the city, the judgment, the loneliness. Above all, she needed peace, however fleeting, to prepare herself for the life growing inside her. Her decision to leave was not without pain. She abandoned her apartment, her job, everything familiar, and set off in the dead of night with nothing but the clothes on her back and the fragile hope that somewhere beyond the city's edge, she could find a sanctuary. The forest had called to her in whispered dreams, a place where the noise of the world fell away, leaving only the quiet hum of nature and the steady beat of her own heart. The journey into the woods had been grueling. Each step was a reminder of how far she'd come from the life she had known. Her body ached in ways she hadn't anticipated, the pregnancy demanding more strength than she had expected. Nights were the hardest. The loneliness pressing in, the cold seeping through thin blankets, and the silence broken only by the rustling of leaves or the distant howl of a lone coyote. But within this solitude, Emma found moments of unexpected clarity. The forest, in its relentless indifference, offered no judgment, only the steady pulse of life in every leaf and stone and breath of wind. She learned to listen, to observe, to find strength in the slow, persistent growth of the world around her. The trees, ancient and unyielding, seemed to hold secrets she longed to understand. Her mind often drifted back to the city, the cramped apartment where she had spent restless nights, the empty chair at the dinner table, the unanswered calls and texts, the faces of friends who had turned away, the echo of David's betrayal. She felt the sting of abandonment keenly, but beneath it, a fierce resolve began to take root. She would not be defined by the past or the choices of others. She would carve out a new path, even if it meant walking alone. One evening, as the sun dipped beneath the horizon and the sky bled shades of orange and purple, Emma sat beneath an ancient oak, her back against its rough bark. She cradled her belly, feeling the faint flutter of life within, a small, steady reminder of hope. In that moment, the forest no longer felt hostile or empty, but alive with possibility. She whispered promises to the child she carried, vows to protect and nurture no matter what lay ahead. Yet, the shadows of fear and uncertainty lingered. Emma knew the road would be long and lonely. The world beyond the trees held dangers and judgments she could not escape, and the secret she carried was fragile, vulnerable to shattering. But the forest had given her something else, a sliver of peace, a quiet sanctuary away from the chaos. Her thoughts often returned to the forgotten church she had discovered, its crumbling stones and faded murals a silent testament to resilience and forgotten stories. It had called to her like a beacon, a place where she might find more than shelter. Perhaps within its walls lay answers, or at least a connection to something greater than her own solitude. The idea of exploring its secrets both intrigued and unsettled her, stirring a cautious hope that she could belong somewhere again. She remembered the first night she had spent there, curled beneath a tattered blanket amid the dust and broken pews. The cold bit into her skin, but the stillness wrapped around her like a fragile promise. In the quiet, she had allowed herself to dream, not of a perfect future, but of survival, of strength, of a life reclaimed from the ruins. The days blurred into one another as Emma settled into a tentative routine. Gathering water from a nearby stream, foraging for wild herbs and berries, and tending to the small fire she kept burning against the chill. Each act was a quiet rebellion against despair, a step toward reclaiming control over her life. The forest's rhythms became her own, a steady cadence that soothed the restless storm inside. But even as she found solace in nature's embrace, the isolation gnawed at her. The absence of human connection was a hollow ache, and the shadows of her past whispered relentlessly. She longed for a sign, something tangible to anchor her amidst the uncertainty. The forgotten church, with its silent stories and hidden history, beckoned like a promise. One afternoon, as the sky threatened rain, Emma stood at the edge of the clearing, gazing at the ruined sanctuary bathed in the soft light of a fading sun. The faint carvings on the altar, the remnants of stained glass, the silent pews. They all spoke of lives lived and lost, of faith and despair intertwined. She felt a kinship with those forgotten souls, a shared burden carried in silence. Her fingers traced the rough stone of the altar once more, and for a fleeting moment, she imagined herself not as a woman broken by circumstance, but as a link in a chain of resilience. The midwife she had read about in a tattered book long ago, the women who had sought refuge in places like this, perhaps their strength flowed through her veins now. A quiet inheritance. As twilight deepened, Emma rose slowly, the ache in her joints a reminder of the life she carried. She wrapped her arms around herself, a gesture of comfort in the growing chill. Tomorrow, she vowed, she would return to the church, explore its hidden corners, uncover its stories. She needed to understand what had become of this forgotten sanctuary, and perhaps, in doing so, she could begin to understand herself. The forest around her whispered secrets in the dark, and Emma listened, her heart steady despite the uncertainty. Alone, she was vulnerable, but not defeated. With every breath, every step, she moved closer to a new beginning, fragile yet fiercely alive. The morning light seeped through the fractured roof of the forgotten church, casting fractured beams that danced over the worn stone floor. Emma pushed open the creaking wooden door with a tentative hand, the air inside thick with dust and the faint scent of damp wood and earth. Each breath she took stirred tiny motes that glittered like tiny stars in the pale sunlight, settling back into the silence as she stepped inside. Her heart beat unevenly, the hollow quiet pressing against her ears. The once sacred space was a shell of its past grandeur, but even in ruin, it held a solemn dignity. Rows of broken pews lay askew, their wood splintered and worn, while the altar at the front stood cracked but resolute. Faded murals clung stubbornly to the walls, ghostly images of saints and angels, their colors muted but still whispering stories of faith and hope. Emma's fingers brushed lightly over a pew as she moved forward, the rough splinters biting gently into her skin. The silence was almost reverent, as if the church itself was holding its breath, waiting to reveal its secrets. She felt both a guest and an intruder, caught between awe and unease. Near the altar, she noticed a symbol carved deep into the stone, a circle intertwined with delicate lines and shapes she couldn't decipher. It was intricate, unlike anything she had seen before, and it seemed to pulse faintly beneath her fingertips, stirring a strange uneasiness that prickled at the back of her neck. She traced the pattern again, her mind racing to understand its meaning. But it remained an enigma. The floor beneath her feet creaked softly as she moved closer to the altar, stepping carefully over scattered debris, broken shards of stained glass, fallen leaves, and crumbled plaster. The air was cool, carrying a hint of moss and forgotten memories. Emma's eyes roamed the space, searching for something more tangible, a clue to the church's hidden past. Her gaze caught on a small wooden box, half buried beneath a fallen beam near the altar's base. Kneeling down, Emma brushed away the dust and peeling bark to reveal an aged, weathered chest, its surface scarred by time. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the lid, revealing a collection of yellowed papers and brittle leather-bound journals. The discovery sent a thrill through her veins. A connection to the lives that had once filled this hollow place. Carefully, she pulled one of the journals free, its cover cracked and faded, and opened it to reveal pages filled with cramped, flowing handwriting. The ink, though faded, held stories preserved against the relentless march of time. Emma settled onto a broken pew, cradling the journal in her lap as she began to read. The words painted a picture of a secret congregation that had gathered here long ago. A group of women, persecuted and cast aside, who found solace within these walls. Their faith was quiet, hidden beneath the watchful eyes of a world that refused to understand them. Among the entries, one name appeared repeatedly. A midwife named Alara, a woman who had dedicated herself to helping women in distress, offering care and protection in a time when such acts were dangerous. Her words spoke of hope and fear, of whispered prayers and the courage it took to defy a society that sought to silence them. Emma felt a peculiar kinship with Alara, her own struggles mirrored in the midwife's determination and compassion. The journal spoke of the sanctuary the church had provided, a refuge not just of stone and wood, but of strength and solidarity for women facing hardship. It was a place where pain was met with understanding, where new life was celebrated amid shadows. As she read, the unease stirred earlier grew stronger, mingling with a sense of awe. The church was not simply a ruin. It was a testament to resilience, a silent guardian of stories that had refused to fade away. Emma's fingers brushed the pages reverently, as if by touching the words she could absorb some of the strength they contained. The afternoon light shifted, casting longer shadows across the altar and illuminating a small alcove tucked behind a crumbling pillar. Drawn by curiosity, Emma rose and moved toward it, the air growing cooler as she approached. Behind the pillar, half hidden beneath a layer of dust and cobwebs, she found a narrow compartment built into the wall. Inside lay a collection of letters, tied with faded ribbons, their edges yellowed and fragile. Emma's hands shook as she untied the bundle and unfolded the first letter, the script elegant and deliberate. The words spoke of fear and hope, of women who had risked everything to protect their children and their futures within the church's embrace. One letter, written by Alara herself, described the midwife's efforts to shield unborn lives from harm, to create a sanctuary where women could give birth in safety and dignity. The passion and tenderness in her words struck Emma deeply, echoing the silent promise she had made to the child growing inside her. A sudden draft swept through the church, rattling the loose panes of glass and stirring the dust. Emma shivered, the weight of the moment settling heavy on her shoulders. This forgotten place, crumbling and silent, was alive with the echoes of those who had come before. A lineage of courage and sacrifice that now mingled with her own story. She closed the journal and letters carefully, her mind racing with questions and possibilities. What had become of this congregation? Why had the church been abandoned and left to decay? And most urgently, what did this history mean for her? A woman carrying a life into an uncertain future. The church seemed to hold its breath as Emma turned toward the exit, the fading light casting her shadow, long and thin, across the floor. Outside, the forest awaited, its dense canopy whispering secrets she was only beginning to understand. The symbol on the altar, the journals, the letters, they were pieces of a puzzle she was determined to solve. As she stepped back into the cool embrace of the woods, Emma felt the first stirrings of something new. A cautious hope that the forgotten church might offer more than shelter. It might hold the key to strength and protection, a legacy she could claim for herself and the child she carried. The path through the forest stretched ahead, uncertain but inviting. Emma's breath steadied, her fingers lingering briefly on the pendant she wore. A small talisman given to her long ago, now a silent link between past and present. With each step, she moved closer to uncovering the church's secrets and perhaps to finding a place where she could belong once more. The weight of the journals and letters pressed gently against Emma's chest as she settled once more beneath the fractured roof of the forgotten church. The sun shifted slowly outside, casting trembling shadows through the broken stained glass, painting the dust in muted colors. The silence was deep, but it held a resonance now, a pulse beneath the stillness, as if the walls themselves breathed with the stories Emma was uncovering. Her fingers traced the edges of the worn pages, careful not to tear the delicate parchment. The words within told of lives lived in the margins, of women who had found refuge here when the world beyond was cruel and unforgiving. The secret congregation had not simply gathered to worship. They had forged a sanctuary of survival, a hidden network of strength and compassion in times when such acts were punishable by fear and violence. Among the faded letters, Emma discovered accounts written in hurried script, tales of women fleeing persecution, seeking sanctuary from judgment and cruelty. They spoke of whispered prayers uttered in the dark, of hands held tightly in moments of fear, and of lives saved beneath the church's battered roof. The stories wove together, a tapestry of resilience that pulsed with quiet defiance. One journal entry stood out, penned in a hand steadier than the rest. It belonged to Alara, the midwife whose name had echoed through the writings. Her words revealed a woman who had dedicated her life to protecting those who were most vulnerable. Women carrying new life into a world that often sought to snuff it out. Alara described her work in tender detail, the careful preparation of herbs and poultices, the soothing touch of hands that brought comfort amid pain. Emma felt the weight of those words settle deep within her. The midwife's courage resonated in her own chest, a quiet fire that flickered amidst her fears. Here was a woman who had faced danger not with weapons, but with compassion and unyielding resolve, who had made this forgotten church a beacon for those who had nowhere else to turn. The more Emma read, the clearer the picture became. The church was not merely a building, it was a lifeline. It had sheltered women cast out by their families, by their communities, by the harsh judgments of a society that refused to understand. It had been a place where pain was met with kindness, where the unborn were protected, and where hope was kindled in the face of despair. As she turned the pages, Emma's thoughts drifted to her own journey. The loneliness, the fear, the whispered doubts that plagued her nights. She felt a kinship with those long ago, a connection that transcended time and circumstance. The midwife's courage infused her with a strength she hadn't known she possessed, a reminder that survival was possible, even in the darkest of places. A sudden creak echoed through the church, pulling Emma from her reverie. She looked up to find a loose stone near the altar, shifting slightly as if nudged by an unseen hand. Heart pounding, she rose and knelt beside it, fingers brushing away dust and debris until she uncovered the outline of a hidden compartment. With trembling hands, Emma pried the stone loose, revealing a narrow cavity carved into the wall. Inside lay a bundle wrapped in faded cloth, carefully tied, as though someone had meant to keep its contents safe. She untied the knot, unveiling a collection of worn personal items: a small wooden box, a faded photograph, and a bundle of letters tied with a ribbon now brittle with age. Emma's breath caught as she lifted the photograph. It showed a group of women gathered outside the church, faces full of quiet determination and resilience. Among them, one figure stood apart, her gaze steady and kind. Emma knew instantly it was Alara, the midwife who had become the heart of this hidden sanctuary. The letters, she realized, might hold even more of the story, the private thoughts and struggles of those who had sought refuge here. As she unfolded the first, the words spilled out in elegant script, revealing the fears and hopes of a woman desperate to protect her unborn child from a world that offered little mercy. Each letter was a window into the past, a testament to the courage of those who had defied the odds. They spoke of secret meetings, of whispered plans to shield the vulnerable, and of sacrifices made to preserve life and dignity. Emma felt the weight of their courage settle around her like a mantle, their voices rising from the shadows to join her own. The church, once silent and forgotten, began to pulse with a new life in Emma's heart. It was a place of refuge and resistance, a symbol of enduring hope. The midwife's sacrifice, the women's unwavering faith, and their shared commitment to protect the unborn wove together into a legacy that now belonged to Emma as well. She closed the letters gently, her fingers lingering on the worn edges. The connection between past and present was undeniable, a thread of strength linking her to those who had come before. The forgotten church was more than stone and dust. It was a sanctuary of resilience, a beacon for the vulnerable, and now a silent promise that Emma was not alone. Outside, the forest whispered through the broken windows, a soft murmur that mingled with the beating of her heart. Emma rose slowly, the journals and letters clutched close, and stepped toward the doorway. The path ahead was uncertain, shadowed by questions and fears, but within her, a quiet flame burned bright. The church's story was hers now to uncover, to carry forward. In its hidden corners and faded pages, Emma had found a reflection of her own struggle, a testament to the power of compassion and the strength born from sheltering those in need. The midwife's legacy was a light in the darkness, a call to courage that stirred within her soul. As she crossed the threshold back into the forest's embrace, Emma felt the weight of the past settling into her bones, not as a burden, but as a source of strength. The forgotten church had given her more than shelter. It had offered her a connection, a purpose, and a hope that she would carry with her into whatever lay ahead. The morning sun filtered softly through the dense canopy as Emma stepped out from the shadowed ruins of the church, the weight of the journals and letters tucked carefully beneath her arm. The forest around her buzzed quietly with life. The distant call of a bird, the rustle of leaves stirred by a gentle breeze. But her thoughts remained anchored to the stories she had uncovered. The secret congregation, the midwife's courage, the hidden sanctuary. All threads of a tapestry she was only beginning to unravel. She knew she could not piece together the church's history alone. The words in the journals, the faded photographs, and the cryptic carvings hinted at a past long buried, one that the nearby village might still remember in whispers or fragments. Emma's heart thudded with a mix of hope and apprehension as she made her way down the winding forest path toward the cluster of houses she had glimpsed from the hilltop. The village emerged gradually, a scattering of weathered cottages and narrow lanes lined with wildflowers and moss-covered stone walls. It was small and quiet, seemingly untouched by time, but Emma sensed a weight beneath its tranquil surface, a reservoir of secrets waiting to be unearthed. She hesitated at the edge of the village, unsure of how her presence would be received. But the yearning for answers propelled her forward. Her first stop was the village square, where a small market was just beginning to stir to life. The air smelled faintly of fresh bread and wood smoke, mingling with the crisp morning chill. Emma approached a woman arranging baskets of wildflowers, her silver hair pulled back in a loose bun, her face etched with lines that spoke of years spent weathering both sun and sorrow. "Excuse me," Emma began, her voice tentative. "I'm looking for information about an old church in the forest, just beyond the village. It's been abandoned for some time, but I believe it has a history connected to this area." The woman's eyes flickered with recognition, a shadow crossing her features. "You mean the old sanctuary?" she said softly. "Not many speak of it anymore. Too many painful memories." Her gaze drifted toward the trees, as if the past lingered among the branches. Emma nodded, sensing the depth behind those words. "I found some journals and letters inside. They mentioned a midwife and a secret congregation. Do you know anything about them?" The woman hesitated, then gestured toward a narrow lane leading deeper into the village. "You should speak with Samuel. He's the local historian, knows more about the church than anyone else alive, lives in the old stone house near the edge of town. If anyone can help, it's him." With a grateful nod, Emma made her way through the winding streets, the village awakening around her. The houses leaned close together, their shutters painted in faded blues and greens, windows adorned with lace curtains fluttering in the breeze. The scent of herbs and earth filled the air, grounding her amid the unfamiliarity. At last, she reached the stone house, a sturdy structure covered in ivy, its windows reflecting the morning light. Emma hesitated before knocking, the sound echoing softly against the weathered door. Moments later, it swung open to reveal a man in his late 60s, his gray hair tousled and eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice warm but cautious. Emma introduced herself and explained her discovery of the church and the artifacts within. Samuel listened intently, nodding as she spoke, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "The church has long been a subject of local legend and sorrow," he said thoughtfully. "It was once a refuge for those the town turned its back on, a place of sanctuary for women and children, especially during darker times." He invited her inside, where shelves crammed with books and old photographs lined the walls. Samuel pulled out a thick volume bound in worn leather and opened it to reveal detailed sketches of the church and notes about its history. "Ilara, the midwife you mentioned, was a revered figure here," he explained. "She worked quietly, defying laws and customs to help those in need. Her story is intertwined with the church's fate." Emma's heart quickened as Samuel recounted tales passed down through generations. How the church had served as a haven for women escaping hardship, how the congregation had faced persecution, and how the sanctuary had ultimately fallen into ruin after a tragic event that left many questions unanswered. Yet, there was skepticism in Emma's mind. Could she trust Samuel? His knowledge was invaluable, but the village had a history of guarding its secrets fiercely. She observed his measured tone and the way his eyes flickered when discussing certain events. Sensing a cautiousness born of years of protecting fragile truths. Determined to learn more, Emma pressed gently for details about the church's downfall and the fate of its congregation. Samuel's expression darkened. "There are those in the village who would prefer the past remain buried," he warned. "Some wounds are still raw, and not all stories are meant to be told." Despite the warning, Emma felt a surge of resolve. The church had called to her for a reason, and the legacy of those women deserved to be remembered. She shared some of the journals and letters she had found, watching as Samuel's eyes widened with recognition and respect. As the afternoon waned, their conversation deepened, weaving between history and memory, fact and legend. Samuel offered to accompany Emma back to the church, to help explore its hidden corners and uncover whatever secrets remained. The thought of an ally, someone who understood both the past and the village's delicate balance, brought a flicker of comfort. Before leaving, Emma wandered the village streets, absorbing the quiet life around her. Children played near a well, elders sat chatting on wooden benches, and the scent of freshly baked bread mingled with the earthy fragrance of the surrounding woods. It was a community shaped by its history, scarred but resilient. As evening settled, Emma returned to the edge of the forest, her mind alive with new questions and cautious hope. The journey to uncover the church's past was no longer hers alone. Samuel's knowledge promised guidance, but also the possibility of confrontation with those who wished to keep the secrets buried. The forgotten sanctuary awaited, its shadowed walls holding stories yet to be told. Emma's steps quickened, the path ahead uncertain but charged with purpose. She carried more than her own burden now, a legacy whispered on the wind, beckoning her to listen, to uncover, and to protect what had been hidden for so long. Night had fallen like a velvet curtain over the forest, wrapping the forgotten church in shadows that seemed to pulse with a silent watchfulness. Emma stood just beyond the crumbling threshold, the cool air pressing against her skin, mingling with the restless beat of her heart. The day's conversation with Samuel echoed in her mind. His warnings about the village's secrets, the unspoken fears that still lingered like ghosts among the trees. She had returned to the church with a mix of determination and unease, eager to delve deeper into its mysteries, but wary of what she might find. The journals and letters had revealed much, but the silence that now surrounded the sanctuary felt heavier, charged with something unseen, yet palpably close. As Emma stepped inside, the weak moonlight filtering through broken stained glass cast fractured patterns on the dust-laden floor. The air was thick and still, carrying the faint scent of moss and damp stone. Her footsteps echoed softly, a reminder that she was alone, or so she thought. A sudden rustle from the shadows made her freeze, breath hitching as her eyes scanned the darkness. A figure slipped between the broken pews, barely visible in the dim light. Emma's pulse quickened, the primal instinct of danger sharpening her senses. Whoever it was moved with purpose, their presence intrusive and unsettling. She called out softly, "Who's there?" No answer came, only the whisper of leaves pressed against the window panes. Emma's gaze darted toward the altar, where the strange symbol she had discovered earlier seemed to absorb the moonlight. Its lines etched deep into the stone like a silent warning. Her mind reeled as she realized she was not alone. Signs of recent disturbance caught her eye. Footprints pressed into the soft earth outside, broken branches near the entrance, and, most unsettling of all, a hastily discarded glove lying just beyond the doorway. Fear prickled at her skin, but beneath it burned a fierce resolve. Someone else had been searching the church, perhaps drawn by the same secrets she sought to uncover. But their intentions were unknown, and the thought sent a shiver crawling down her spine. The woods outside seemed alive with shadowy figures, their movements hidden among the trees. Emma's breath came in shallow gasps as she pressed her back against the cold stone wall, listening intently. The silence was punctuated only by distant, muffled sounds. Footsteps crunching on leaves, a twig snapping underfoot. Hours passed in tense stillness. Emma's senses stretched taut as she remained motionless, waiting for whatever might emerge from the darkness. The church, once a sanctuary of solace, now felt like a trap, its broken walls a cage. When dawn's first light finally crept through the shattered windows, Emma stepped cautiously outside, the chill of the morning air biting into her skin. She scanned the perimeter and found more signs. Scattered footprints leading away into the forest, marks that suggested someone had been rifling through the ruins. Later, when Samuel arrived as promised, Emma shared her unsettling discoveries. His face grew grave as he examined the evidence. "You're not the only one interested in the church's secrets," he said quietly. "There are those who see this place as a treasure trove, not of history or hope, but of profit." He warned her of local superstitions, stories whispered by the village elders about curses and restless spirits guarding the sanctuary. Samuel's voice carried a note of caution, urging Emma to be vigilant. "This isn't just about uncovering the past," he said. "Some want to control it, to exploit what remains for their own ends." The warning settled heavily over Emma, mingling with her own fears. She realized that the church's legacy was more than fragile history. It was a battleground between those who sought to protect and those who wished to take. That night, as Emma lay beneath a thin blanket in the shelter of the church's collapsed nave, the sounds of the forest seemed to close in around her. The wind whispered through the broken windows, carrying with it the faintest echoes of footsteps and muffled voices. Shadows moved just beyond the firelight's reach, and the sense of unseen eyes watching her grew impossible to ignore. Sleep eluded her, replaced by a restless vigilance. Every crack and creak set her heart racing, every rustle a potential threat. Yet beneath the fear, a stubborn flame of determination burned steadily. She was no longer running from her past, she was standing her ground, ready to defend the sanctuary that had become her refuge. As the nights wore on, the threats escalated. Signs of sabotage appeared. Her small campfire was doused in the night, her gathered herbs disturbed, footprints circling her shelter. Emma confronted the chilling reality that someone was intent on driving her away, on claiming the church's secrets for themselves. But with each threat, her resolve deepened. She began to set traps around the perimeter, using knowledge gleaned from Samuel and her own ingenuity to protect what she had found. The forest became both ally and adversary, its tangled paths a maze to confuse any pursuer. One evening, as a storm rolled in, lightning illuminating the twisted branches above, Emma heard voices, low and urgent, carrying through the trees. She held her breath, heart pounding as shadowy figures approached the church, their intentions unmistakable. Drawing on the courage she had found within, Emma stepped from the shadows, confronting the intruders with a voice steady despite the fear tightening her chest. "This place is not yours to take." For a moment, the forest held its breath. Then, as if summoned by the rising wind, Samuel appeared at her side, his presence a steadfast anchor. The intruders hesitated, then retreated into the darkness, leaving behind a silence thick with tension. The village, once distant and indifferent, was now intertwined with her fate. Allies and adversaries alike loomed in the shadows, and the church's secrets had become a battleground far greater than Emma had imagined. In the quiet aftermath, as the storm raged beyond the sanctuary's broken walls, Emma stood firm. The forgotten church was no longer just a ruin. It was a refuge worth fighting for, a symbol of resilience amid encroaching darkness. Her journey was far from over. But in that moment, beneath the trembling light and the watchful trees, Emma found a fierce, unyielding strength. The sanctuary's legacy was alive within her, a shield forged from courage and hope against the unknown forces closing in. The chill of the early morning seeped through the cracked stone floor as Emma lit a small lantern, its warm glow pushing back the shadows that clung to the forgotten church's interior. The storm from the previous night had passed, leaving the forest slick with rain and the air thick with the scent of damp earth and moss. Despite the lingering unease from recent encounters, Emma felt a renewed determination as she prepared to explore the sanctuary's depths once more. Guided by a faint outline she had noticed beneath a worn tapestry near the altar, Emma knelt and began to clear away the dust and debris. Her fingers pressed against the cold stone, tracing the edges of a concealed trapdoor cleverly camouflaged within the floor. The wood beneath was old and swollen from years of moisture, but with effort, she pried it open, revealing a narrow, steep staircase descending into darkness. A rush of cold air rose from below, carrying with it the scent of earth and forgotten secrets. Emma's heart pounded as she grasped the lantern tightly and stepped carefully down the uneven steps. The walls closed in around her, damp and rough, the silence broken only by the soft drip of water echoing in the subterranean space. At the bottom, she found herself in a small crypt, its stone walls lined with alcoves and niches filled with relics and personal items. Worn shawls, carved wooden crosses, bundles of dried herbs, and faded photographs. Each artifact seemed to whisper fragments of lives once intertwined with the church's purpose. The air was heavy with the weight of memory and loss. Emma moved slowly, reverently, absorbing the tangible traces of a community that had sought refuge here. The crypt was a sanctuary within a sanctuary, a hidden chamber preserving the intimate stories of those who had found shelter beneath the church's roof. Her eyes caught on a leather-bound diary resting on a stone pedestal at the crypt's center. Its cover was embossed with a delicate symbol matching the one etched into the altar above. Emma opened it gently, the pages worn but legible, and began to read. The diary belonged to Alara, the midwife whose courage had become a beacon in the journals Emma had discovered earlier. But these entries were more personal, revealing the depth of Alara's commitment and the sacrifices she had made. In her own words, Alara described the quiet battles she fought, not only against external threats, but against despair and isolation. She wrote of nights spent tending to women in labor, often under the threat of discovery by hostile forces, of the secret medicine she prepared, drawn from the forest's bounty, of the unyielding hope she carried for each unborn child, a hope that transcended fear and pain. One entry stood out, a poignant account of a night when danger had come too close. Alara had hidden a group of women and newborns in the crypt, shielding them from those who sought to tear them apart. She described the hushed prayers, the trembling breaths, and the fierce determination that had held them together. Emma felt a swell of emotion as she read the midwife's words. The diary was not just a record. It was a testament to resilience and love in the face of overwhelming odds. The church had been more than a refuge. It had been a cradle of life, a fortress of protection for the most vulnerable. As she turned the pages, Emma's gaze fell upon a small sketch tucked between the diary's leaves. It depicted the church's floor plan, with a hidden chamber marked beneath the altar, the very crypt she now stood within. Annotations in Alara's hand detailed the purpose of each alcove, the herbs stored for healing, and the symbols carved for protection. Emma traced the sketch with a trembling finger, the connection between past and present crystallizing in her mind. The sanctuary's legacy was alive in this hidden space, waiting to be reclaimed. Her thoughts drifted to the child growing within her, the life she carried through fear and uncertainty. In Ilara's sacrifice, she found a mirror of her own struggle and a wellspring of strength. The midwife's courage was a silent companion, a guiding light in the darkness. A sudden noise startled Emma, a soft shuffle near the crypt's entrance. She turned swiftly, lantern raised, heart pounding. The shadows revealed nothing but the flicker of her own breath and the settling dust. The tension that had gripped her in recent days lingered. But here, in this sacred space, it was tempered by a profound sense of purpose. Emma gathered the relics she could carry: the diary, a bundle of dried herbs, and a small carved cross, and ascended the stairs, the weight of history resting gently upon her shoulders. The church above seemed different now, its broken walls infused with a renewed sense of life and meaning. Outside, the forest breathed with quiet resilience, the morning sun filtering through leaves wet with rain. Emma paused at the threshold, her hand resting on the worn stone of the altar. The symbol beneath her fingers pulsed faintly, a silent echo of the sanctuary's power and promise. The forgotten church, long a place of shadow and silence, was awakening once more. Not just as a ruin, but as a refuge. Emma felt the stirrings of a new beginning, a legacy of strength and protection she was determined to carry forward. With the dawn breaking around her, she stepped back into the forest's embrace. The crypt's secrets nestled close to her heart. The path ahead was uncertain, but Emma moved with the quiet courage of those who had come before, ready to face whatever lay beyond the shadows. The forest was thick with twilight shadows as Emma made her way back to the forgotten church. The heavy leather-bound diary and bundle of herbs pressed tightly against her chest. The weight of the crypt's secrets settled deep within her, mingling with the growing unease that had shadowed her steps ever since she sensed she was being watched. The days of quiet exploration were fading. Something darker was creeping closer. As she approached the clearing, the silhouette of the church loomed in the fading light, its broken spire stabbing at the sky like a fractured beacon. The air was still, unnaturally so, and the usual chorus of birds and insects had fallen silent. Emma's heart quickened, every nerve alert to the slightest sound. A sudden crack echoed through the underbrush, sharp and deliberate. Emma froze, eyes scanning the shadows where the trees clustered thickest. From behind a gnarled oak, a man stepped forward, tall with a hard, angular face partially obscured by the brim of a weathered hat. His eyes, cold and calculating, fixed on her. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice low and edged with warning. Emma swallowed her fear, steadying her breath. "This place belongs to no one but those who need it," she replied, her voice firmer than she felt. "I'm here to protect it." The man's lips twisted into a sneer. "Protect it? You don't understand what's at stake. There's value here, things worth more than stories and old stones. You're standing in the way of progress, and that won't be tolerated." Emma's gaze flicked toward the shadowed ruins behind her. The journals, the diaries, the relics. They were worth more than money to her. They were a legacy that demanded respect. She squared her shoulders. This church is a sanctuary. It's history, not a commodity. The man laughed, a harsh sound that cut through the silence like a blade. "History doesn't pay the bills. I'm here to claim what's rightfully mine." Before Emma could respond, a second figure emerged from the trees, a man with a grizzled beard and sharp eyes, stepping into the dimming light. Emma's relief was immediate when she recognized Samuel, the village historian. His presence was a steadying anchor amid the encroaching threat. "You've come too far," Samuel said firmly, standing beside Emma. "Leave now, before this escalates." The first man's eyes flicked to Samuel, calculating. "You're meddling in matters you don't understand, old man. This place holds secrets that belong to those willing to take them." Emma felt a surge of defiance rise within her. "The church's secrets aren't yours to seize. You'll have to go through me." A tense silence stretched between them, the forest holding its breath. Then, without warning, the man lunged forward, reaching for a bag slung at his side. Emma's heart pounded as she dodged instinctively, stumbling back toward the church's entrance. Samuel moved quickly, stepping between the man and Emma, his voice sharp and commanding. "Enough." The man hesitated, the tension crackling like electricity. Then, with a curse, he retreated into the shadows, disappearing as swiftly as he had come. Emma sank against the rough stone wall, breath ragged but spirit unbroken. Samuel's steady gaze met hers. Thereafter the artifacts, the land beneath the church, mineral rights, valuable relics. They see this as nothing more than profit. Emma nodded, the weight of the threat settling heavy on her. The sanctuary she had found was now a battleground. Over the following days, the tension escalated. The church was no longer a quiet refuge, but a focal point of conflict. Emma and Samuel worked together, documenting the artifacts, gathering evidence, and alerting the local authorities to the threats. The village community, once distant, began to rally around them, stirred by Emma's courage and the church's storied past. But the opposition was relentless. One night, Emma discovered her carefully tended fire doused, the herbs she had gathered scattered and crushed. Footprints circled her shelter, a chilling message meant to intimidate. Despite the fear, Emma's resolve hardened. She set traps around the perimeter, marking boundaries with makeshift warnings. Samuel helped, bringing knowledge of the land and its hidden paths. Together, they formed a fragile alliance, united by a shared purpose. Then came the storm, a violent tempest that tore through the forest, rain lashing the broken windows and wind howling through the shattered spire. Emma took refuge inside the church, the howling storm outside mirroring the turmoil within. Amidst the chaos, labor pains struck unexpectedly. The sanctuary that had once sheltered women in the past now became the place where Emma faced the most critical moment of her own journey. With trembling hands and fierce determination, she prepared herself, drawing strength from the legacy that surrounded her. Samuel remained by her side, a steady presence offering words of encouragement and practical aid. The church, battered yet unbroken, held its breath as Emma's courage met the storm head-on. When the first cry of new life pierced the tempest, it was a triumphant declaration, a beacon of hope amid darkness. The birth was more than a personal victory. It was a continuation of the sanctuary's mission, a testament to the enduring strength born within these walls. As the storm subsided and dawn broke, the village began to stir with renewed purpose. Emma, cradling her newborn child, felt the profound weight of legacy and hope. The forgotten church was no longer just a ruin. It was a living sanctuary, protected by those who understood its true value, not in gold or land, but in resilience, compassion, and the unbroken line of those who had sought refuge within. The battle was far from over, but in that sacred moment, Emma knew she was no longer alone. The church's legacy lived on, carried forward by new hands and hearts ready to defend its promise. The storm had settled into a relentless drum against the shattered windows of the forgotten church, rain slashing through the broken panes like a curtain of cold needles. The wind howled through the crumbling spire, a mournful wail that seemed to echo the turmoil within Emma's body. She clutched the worn altar rail for support, every breath shallow and ragged as labor pains rippled through her, with unrelenting force. The sanctuary that had once sheltered generations now became a refuge for her alone, the weight of history pressing down alongside the pain. The faded murals, the broken pews, the altar etched with ancient symbols. They all watched silently as Emma fought through each wave of agony, her resolve hardening like the stone beneath her fingertips. Samuel knelt beside her, his face drawn but steady, offering water and whispered encouragement. His hands were gentle yet firm, a lifeline in the tempest, raging both outside and within. The journals and relics they had uncovered lay nearby, silent witnesses to the legacy Emma was now becoming part of. Lightning flashed, illuminating the church's interior in stark, fleeting bursts. Shadows danced across the walls, intertwining with the flickering candlelight Samuel had managed to kindle. The storm's fury was a stark contrast to the fragile life Emma carried, a reminder of the precariousness of hope in the face of nature's indifference. With each contraction, Emma's grip tightened, her breath steadying despite the pain. She whispered promises to the child she carried, a vow to protect, to love, to endure. The midwife, Alara's legacy, echoed in her mind, a silent chorus of strength passed down through time. Outside, the forest swayed and groaned, branches thrashing as the storm threatened to tear the sanctuary apart. But within the church's battered walls, a fragile world held fast, a cocoon of resilience forged through centuries of hardship and hope. Hours blurred as Emma's labor progressed, the storm's wrath unyielding but distant compared to the intensity of the moment. Samuel remained by her side, his presence a steady anchor, guiding her through the darkness with quiet determination. At last, as the first light of dawn crept through the broken windows, a cry pierced the silence, a sharp, urgent sound that cut through the storm's remnants and filled the sanctuary with life. Emma's tears mingled with sweat and rain as she cradled her newborn daughter, the tiny body warm and fragile against her chest. The birth was more than an ending. It was a beginning, a testament to survival, to hope, and to the enduring power of the sanctuary. The church, once forgotten and forsaken, had become a cradle of new life, its mission reborn in the quiet strength of a mother and child. Samuel smiled through tired eyes, the weight of the night's ordeal evident, but softened by the joy that now radiated from the small bundle in Emma's arms. "She's a fighter," he whispered, "just like her mother." Outside, the storm began to fade, the first birds tentatively greeting the dawn with hesitant songs. The forest, washed clean and glistening with raindrops, seemed to breathe anew as light spilled through the canopy. Emma gazed down at her daughter, feeling the profound connection that tied her to the generations before. Women who had sought refuge, who had fought and hoped and lived within these walls. The church's legacy was alive, embodied in the fragile life she now held. As the morning sun warmed the cold stone, Emma wrapped her daughter in a soft blanket, the scent of rain mingling with a faint aroma of herbs dried nearby. The sanctuary, battered but unbroken, stood as a symbol of resilience, a beacon of strength in a world that often seemed indifferent. The village would soon awaken to the news, and the path ahead would be fraught with challenges. But in this moment, surrounded by history and hope, Emma found a deep well of peace. She whispered her daughter's name softly, Elelanena, a tribute to the sanctuary, to the midwife who had come before, and to the enduring line of women who had shaped this place. The forgotten church, once a silent witness to loss and hardship, had become a home filled with new beginnings. And as mother and child rested beneath the ancient rafters, the legacy of courage and protection carried on, unbroken and alive. The first light of morning spilled gently across the weathered stones of the forgotten church, bathing the sanctuary in a soft, golden glow that seemed to breathe new life into its crumbling walls. Emma sat quietly in the nave, her newborn daughter nestled safely in her arms. The rhythmic rise and fall of her breath, a steady counterpoint to the distant hum of village life awakening beyond the forest's edge. The church, once a silent relic swallowed by time and neglect, was stirring toward a new chapter, one shaped not only by history, but by the fierce determination of those who now sought to preserve its legacy. Emma's resolve had deepened in the weeks since Elena's birth, transforming from fragile hope into steadfast purpose. The sanctuary was no longer merely a refuge. It was a foundation upon which a future could be built. With Samuel's unwavering support, Emma had begun the arduous task of restoring the church. Together, they organized the villagers, many of whom had once turned away, but now returned, drawn by the story of survival and renewal. Hands that had seldom touched stone now cleared debris, repaired broken beams, and tended to the overgrown gardens reclaiming the grounds. Legal battles loomed on the horizon. Claims from developers eager to exploit the land's mineral rights threatened to uproot the fragile peace Emma had fought to establish. But armed with historical documents, community backing, and a passionate conviction, Emma confronted the challenges head-on. Meetings with attorneys, petitions, and public forums became part of her daily rhythm, each step a brick laid in the foundation of protection. The church's walls echoed with new sounds. Laughter as children played among the ruins, voices raised in song during evening gatherings, the soft murmur of prayers whispered in renewed faith. The sanctuary was transforming from a place of isolation into a beacon of community and healing. Emma envisioned a refuge for women like herself, those who had faced hardship, loneliness, or fear, and began laying plans for a foundation to provide shelter, support, and empowerment. The legacy of Alara and the secret congregation lived on in this mission, a living testament to resilience woven through generations. One afternoon, as sunbeams filtered through the stained glass fragments, Emma stood near the altar, watching Elena toddle among the wildflowers blooming in the courtyard. The child's laughter was a bright thread, stitching together past and present, a symbol of hope blooming amid the ruins. Samuel approached, his eyes reflecting a quiet pride. "You've done more than restore a building," he said softly. "You've rekindled a spirit." Emma smiled, feeling the weight of the journey, the losses, the battles, the moments of fear and courage settle into a profound sense of belonging. The church was no longer forgotten. It was alive, a sanctuary in every sense, holding the stories of those who had come before and nurturing the lives yet to come. As twilight descended, Emma stepped outside onto the porch, the cool evening air wrapping around her like a gentle embrace. She gazed at the moonlit grounds, the shadows stretching long across the mossy stones and blooming gardens. In the stillness, she felt the presence of the women who had walked this path before. Ilara, the congregation, the countless unnamed souls who had sought refuge within these walls. The unbroken line of Thornfield women had endured through time, their strength a quiet flame passed from hand to hand. Now, Emma and Elena were part of that legacy, their lives intertwined with the sanctuary's revival. With a deep breath, Emma looked toward the horizon where the village lights twinkled softly, a promise of community and connection. The path ahead would not be without challenges, but she was ready, rooted in history, buoyed by hope, and surrounded by those who believed. In the heart of the forgotten church, beneath the watchful stars, home was no longer a distant dream, but a living, breathing reality. The sanctuary stood as a beacon of resilience, faith, and renewal. A place where past and present converged, and where the future blossomed in the hands of those courageous enough to claim it.